the curriculum, that important stuff, what I said at the beginning, that important stuff that's taught in schools, then it must be on a scale of what, 1 to 1,000, something like that. For every 1,000 words spoken about Ofsted, there's probably 1 word spoken seriously about the curriculum. And do you know what? That probably suits a lot of people, doesn't it? Always easy to unite around a common enemy, or at least to find a common enemy around which your enemies can unite. And if you think about the changes that have occurred around the curriculum over the last few years, I believe, thinking or otherwise, that's partly been allowed to happen because the focus that we've had in education has been about the wrong things. It's been fussing about things like education policy, it's been fussing about things like structures and systems, and it's not been fussing enough about the curriculum. You might think there's been too much radical curriculum change. I might not agree with you in terms of the timescale that's associated with that change, because part of me thinks that if you want somebody to do something well, you've got to practice it. Like my daughter doing the piano. You know, she's got to practice, that's how you become good at stuff. But it's actually partly because the curriculum that's being taught in schools today is exactly the same curriculum, more or less, as my father was being taught the curriculum when he was at school. And actually my grandfather, grandmother and mother too were being taught at school. And probably beyond that, when my grandfather, I'm old enough to know that when he was being taught at school, he probably had a subject called empire as well. But the curriculum that we're still teaching our children is essentially exactly the same Victorian curriculum that it ever was. And it seems to me that that's the kind of thing that we ought to be thinking about and whether or not that's right. And I'd urge you to do one thing, if one thing only, and that's revisit a series of books written back in 1985 by Her Majesty's Inspectorate called Curriculum Matters. They were called Raspberry Ribbons, so little booklets. And what they did was they talked about what kind of curriculum ought to look like to serve today's society. And it was just on the brink, we were just on the brink of making all of that happen in this country when the national curriculum came along and the man who ran the post offices reviewed Ron Deering and all that came along and introduced the national curriculum. But return to that 1985 Curriculum Matters book, and that might be a serious starting point for where you want to go next. Thank you very much for listening. Sorry I've talked too much, but happy to take any questions later on.
Okay, my name is Julian Harrison, I'm a teacher here at Horbury Academy. Thanks again for coming along. Thanks to Mike especially for coming along. It's during his school holidays like many of you, so we really appreciate that. We're running quite short of time. Just a reminder that you've got some post-it notes on your desk there. Any questions for Mike? Fill them in, just leave them on your tables, we'll come and collect them. We'll select a few for Mike to answer after the break. I'd like to hand over to Howell now. Where is he? He's here. I'm not going to say much. It's a bit in your programme about him. Ex-teacher here at Horbury School, as it was at some point. Is that right, Howell?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Grab the mic, Howell. There you go.
All right? Yeah. I don't know how long I've got. Where's my... I don't know how long I've got now.
Oh, you're not like.
I've got 5 minutes here. You ready? That was good though, wasn't it? That was interesting stuff there. I just want to get the ambience in the room a bit different. It's really lovely to be here, and I'll be really quick. How long have I got? 10 minutes? I'll be fast. Are you ready? I've got stuff to tell you. I've got stuff to report back. It's stuff I found out. I was full-time till 2009 in a variety of schools, but since then I'm part-time in a lot of schools now. And next week I'm teaching year 1 and year 4. And I'm kind of worried about year 1 because I'm a secondary teacher, and I think it'll be like being hit in the face with a saucepan. We're doing what's inside us. I've been thinking about that this morning, so if you teach year 1, can I have a brew with you in a minute? Okay, yeah. So there's Barnsley. It's just down the road from here, and I've got a few old colleagues here as well from the town. I do a lot of work there now in the special setting around curriculum. It was really nice to hear that from Mike just then about the curriculum at the end. curriculum is where it's at. It's what we should be talking about and thinking about, and I want to think about that for a bit now, because I think curriculum is where we can come into our own as teachers, as classroom practitioners. The other stuff speaks for itself. I've got my heart on my sleeve. The Times Ed described me as a trioga, which I thought was brilliant, until my wife pointed out that it was a criticism. And if I've got a thing, it's how do we trap kids in, and how do we get children bothered about what they learn? How do we get children in Cleethorpes, for instance, bothered about pyramids? They like them, but so what? So how do we do that? In year 10, how do we get children bothered about poetry from other cultures? How do we get them interested in poetry there? The poetry of the Crimean War. How do we get that to matter to them? And I'm really interested in that. It's so wonderful having a Teachmeet. I live up the road, so it's absolutely fantastic, because I love doing Teachmeets, because you've turned up and you want to be here. Often I do insects, and there is Twilight's are the worst, aren't they? You know, you feel that people have been marched in, but, you know, we all slap a brave face on. That is a picture of the first Teachmeet. It's actually a picture of just an old picture. I put into the search engine just some people in the pub drinking, and this one tickled me and I thought you'd like it. But the first Teachmeet was in a Glasgow pub in 2006. And it's gone global, it's fantastic, and you're part of that tonight. And it's really nice to be asked to do a keynote like Mike and I have been asked to do. It's really nice, but we're just really a bit of fluff at the side. What's important is the conversations that you have, and I'm going to ask you to have a conversation in a minute. Thank you. That's the sort of quote I have to read 3 times. But then it makes absolute sense. You only read it once, you get it. It's like we've had the soul ripped out over time, and I think Mike's alluded to that a little bit. When I know Mike talks about curriculum and I'm talking about curriculum, I'm talking about getting the soul back in, so that we're not wandering around the corridors like ghosts, like the school's haunted. We're actually passionate and on fire about what we do. And nights like this sort of help us with that link. Inset days do it, training programs do it. I've been privileged to work with a lot of schools, some schools represented here tonight, where they've actually really gone through it with CPD, and it's not just one-offs, it's actually a real fit program, fit for purpose. And I think that's where we can get that nice link between all the thinking that goes on with people who don't teach, you know, researchers and that. And then people who are in classrooms, and it's sort of tonight and nights like this and events like this do really nicely to bridge that gap, I feel, and I hope you get that sensation. I'm flying out. Look at that. Oh. That's teaching, isn't it? That's what it's like. And there's always someone rocking up wanting to know why you're doing it. Someone on a chuffing learning wall. Coming in and bothering you. Standing next to your kids saying things like, what are you learning? Kid wants, you know, you want the kid to say, I'm learning, I never want to be like you. And often teaching, it's a shame because of, and perhaps because of all the static that goes on around school, above school, not in school, but the static around it that we're protected from, often by our senior leaders. We're protected from a lot of the static. Teaching has started being couched in terms of survival, like Robinson Crusoe. And I don't know, I get the NQTs in Barnsley, and they come in September high-fiving each other, long-fiving, dribble in the middle. And then round about October, when they come in again, it's a bit like Saving Private Ryan. And it's what's happening, and it is survival. And I love that thing about the vac box. Because I remember being confronted with a pro forma to fill in before the lesson, and I think I cried, because I had to fill in 30 of them or something, and it was just a week-worthy experience. So it was really nice to hear that just get honest. It shouldn't be about survival. It shouldn't be teachers making do, teachers grappling to TES Connect, desperate for a lesson plan that's going to get them off the hook tomorrow. Desperate. So they download it and they just got to think, yeah, I've done it, and then they go in and they realise it's been written for a prep school in Kent. So you start speaking the words, and the kids are going, are you alright? I'm not going to read that to you, but there is that sense of fear around coverage, and that's where we can start thinking about curriculum. I do a lot in primary, accidentally, I'm in primary a lot of special, and I love working with special schools. And that fear around coverage is really, it's really there, and I know it is in secondary. Are we covering everything we need to cover? And I think that shouldn't be the first question, I think that should be a question at the end, perhaps the question being, have we covered everything we need to cover? I don't know, let's go and have a look. And then tick through, and then you'll see what else needs doing. Thanks, John. Can you link that? Yeah. You can link that. If you're young, that's called a pencil. Can you link that? Have a chat with the person next to you. Can you link the elderly and mathematics? Can you do that now, please? I'll show you what I've done with that. What sort of teacher are you? Are you traditional? You don't belong. We don't do it like that round here. Are you traditional? I don't want to change. Or are you progressive? Are you prog? Are you... Let's just get rid of tables. In fact, let's get rid of tables, chairs and curtains. This is my new thing, it's Jaws for learning. I don't think it's going to catch on. So I've just got it as a PowerPoint slide. But for me, I'm neither trad or prog. I'm in the middle, what I want, and I suspect what you want, and I suspect it's why you're here. I suspect we just want ideas and things that might work for our children. And do you know what? We've got to be open to those ideas. I've learned so much working in primary, as I have done for the last few years. I've learned so much, but it's informed by secondary practice. Because it's all transferable. But it takes a bit of filtering and a bit of work, doesn't it? On our behalf. That's where the teaching comes in. That's the proper teacher that I think, at work. The teacher who isn't rushing to TES Connect, desperately trying to find a quick fix. But actually the teacher who's thinking. Do you know Jaws? Pardon? Yeah, you do, don't you? I saw it when I was 5. Slept properly again when I was 9. My brother used to run into my bedroom and grab my legs and shout, "Shark! Shark!" Yeah, it's alright, but if you remember Quint, the quintessential sea dog, and he just didn't want to change, and he was very suspicious of the progressive science shark expert, Hooper. And in the middle was poor old Chief Brody, just wanting to get the job done, which I think is probably what we all want. So can we just, tonight, just before 20 to 6, and we're stopping at 10 to for a brew. Okay? That's me feeding anticipation in. Should we see ourselves as leaders of the curriculum? Let's see ourselves as creators of the curriculum. Yes, we've got coverage, but how we deliver that coverage, that's our job. That's where we wrap the humanity around the thing that we've printed off. the website, the curriculum there that we've been given. How do we wrap the humanity around it? How do we lead our children? And when I think of that idea of the Sherpa sort of leading the way, and I think of almost metaphorically holding children's hands, and that's pedagogy, isn't it? How we help children through the challenge and through all the work that we have to ask them to do. I know you know Dylan William, and he's got a hearing and everything. But I love that quote because that sums it up for me. The curriculum should be something that's imposed on us. It's something that we have a handle on and something we contribute to. And I know when I was a full-time English teacher, which I started teaching here all those years, in 1993, when I started teaching here, it was very much, here's the stuff you need to teach. Go and figure out how you're going to do it. And obviously you went to your more experienced colleagues for some guidance and advice. And in a way, they led you. And they brought you on. We call it mentoring now. Back then it was just helping each other out. Can you just have a chat? It took me ages to set that up. It's not right, I'm phoning social services. Just in the spirit of a team, I know it is a keynote, but is it alright if we just have a chat with each other? It's a think, pair, share, so we all know about that, we're all good with it. But first, think yourself, in your own head now, what is your #1 tactic that you use, no matter what age you teach, no matter what setting? What's your #1 tactic for getting kids to respond to you, to get engagement? What's your #1 tactic? Think about it. Yeah, that's my #1. Oh yeah, that's it. And now I've refined it into a statement because I'm going to tell the person sitting next to me what my #1 tactic is. Can you do that now? Tell the person next to you. Of the Teachmeet. So I'd like you all to stand up, please. Stand up and don't look difficult about it. And now, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you, with the person you've been speaking with, I'd like you, you're in partnership now. I'd like you to walk around and find another pair. Maybe a couple you don't like the look of. And I want you to share with one another your #1 engagement tactic. Let's move around. in the spirit of, obviously there's a lot of us, it's a little bit, it's controlled, but it's controlled chaos. So could you just put up your hand, and from your group, just one of the ideas, one of the things, yes?
Humour.
Humour? Oh, bloody joke. Well, I'm sure, I think Ofsted did some research, it was quite a long time ago, in 2003, 2004, into how do we get lads particularly not to be passive, now we engage them, and we know that, don't we? Humour is a key thing. Although I did do a day for 400 teachers recently, and a teacher came up to me at the end and just said, "It's all right for you, but I'm not funny." Oh, you're not here. Thank you, that's one. Another, please. Talking to each other. Talking to each other. Thank you. Conversation. Another one.
Enthusiasm.
Oh, shouting out, yeah? Go on, miss. Enthusiasm. Enthusiasm. If you haven't got it, pretend. You're being paid by the taxpayer. Part of your job. Go on, go on.
Smile.
Smile. Thank you. We had that up here, didn't we? Smiling. Thank you.
Keeping it real.
Keeping it real. Does anyone else have the end school? Keeping it real. Keeping it relevant. Is that one? And there we can go back, if we had more time, we can go back there into curriculum, couldn't we? Some more hands went up over there. No, they didn't. I said that to give you a bit of encouragement. Miss?
I'd say pace and passion.
Oh. Have you seen people writing that down now? The thing is, thanks for doing that. Just stay where you are for a minute. Thanks for doing that. The key thing is, from all of that, if we wrote down that really long list, we'd find, wouldn't we? You can't go on a course for any of them. You can't go on a course for enthusiasm. Although I've met some people who should. I know you have, no. You can't go on a course for humour. It's not about stand-up and having good jokes, although sometimes having a couple of one-liners up your sleeve helps. Just the smile, which I'm sure if some people, if some Daily Mail readers heard that, they'd be going like, smiling, is that it? Is that it? Well, I could do that. There's so much more to it, to that smile. That smile is so important for those, certainly some of the angry and some of the vulnerable children that I've worked with recently. The smile is powerful, and that conversation is powerful as well. That's the point. You can't go on a course for it. So tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, and thinking about the speakers and the information we're going to get after the break, how are you going to apply the knowledge and the wisdom we're going to hear? How are you going to apply that through yourself? Because what we've just described there as well is hopefully you. So please would you sit down? I've just got a couple more things. Right, okay, so hang on 4 minutes. Here we go. Ching. Creativity. Oh, there's a word that strikes fear into the heart of some people. Creativity to me is structure. But the creative teacher is one who can link the cassette and the pencil. It's the one who can look at the difficult science and think, I am going to help Declan understand this. And that's the creative teacher. It's not necessarily about drama, about dance, about music. It is about those things as well. It's not just about doing raps in science. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying there is hopefully a box on a pro forma that says, how are you being creative today? It's just there. And if you are using creative approaches like philosophy for children or Manson with the expert, which we're going to hear about later, then that's great. It's structured and it's got integrity. Let's keep it on, John. So how do we hook in? Joe's for learning. How do we hook in? And the next, please. And how do we fascinate? That's the tattoo I've got across here. How do we fascinate our children? Do we use that trick that my old science teacher in Manchester used to use? I've told some of you this before. We used to run to science because he always had something dead in a jar. Yeah? At the front we go, see what's that? What's that? And he'd go, that boy, size as the fetus of a calf. We go, oh! But we were there bang on time and ready. He probably shouldn't have been working with kids. How do you fascinate? How are you fascinating your class tomorrow? Starts with you. Kids learn you before anything else. So it starts with you. What's next? All those things you said, the enthusiasm, the smile and the humour, all those engagement tactics, it's an emotional contract that we're setting up. So how do we move that then into curriculum? How do we get our children emotionally engaged in curriculum? And that's where that botheredness, I think, comes in. Can you just tell the person next to you how to build a pyramid really quickly? I've been doing to Egyptians, and I went in there, and they'd had a week, and I went in, and they'd done a lot of Wikipedia work, I've noticed. They're all right now. I sat with them and I said, look, Pharaoh's got in touch. He wants a pyramid before he dies. And suddenly there was a lot of tension because we didn't know how old he was, there was all sorts of things going on. But they told me how to build a pyramid. They told me, they drew it, they explained, we did pulleys and so on. Next one, please. The week after I was in Cairo, and I did the same thing. I wondered if they'd be able to make some pyramids. I said, how do we make pyramids? And they told me, I wouldn't say exactly the same, but a pretty similar account to the children in Cleethorpes. I can't explain it, colleagues, they just did. Most of the class in that school in Cairo hadn't been to the pyramids. And the big learning for me there was about assumptions. We've had a letter from, do you know the Old People's Home? Yeah. I found if I nod at kids when I ask a question, they nod back. It doesn't happen in year 9, but you just go along with it, then you'll stop, then you get a room. We've had this letter. They found out that they've got a patch of land 5 metres by 8 metres that they didn't realise was theirs, so it's overgrown. And they'd like it turning into a garden of reflection for the old people to enjoy. And they've got in touch with us. You think it's something we could help them with? Yeah. What with our experience of landscape gardening? We won't talk about what happened last time. Can you just tell the person next to you, if we were going to do that, what shouldn't we put in that patch of land 5 metres by 8 metres that's going to be a garden of reflection? What shouldn't we put in there? Have a chat. I'm up against the clock, aren't I? So, what did you say that we didn't need? Trampolines? Pardon? Tombstones? Alright. I just had our day. Did anyone say steps? Steps, and you weren't talking about manufactured pop band, were you? That'd be a tragedy. What else should we put in there? Kids said. Kids, thanks for shouting. Who said what?
A shark.
A shark? What are you doing after? A kid said, don't be putting it, and this was a kid in primary, proper wily, this kid, he went, he leaned back in his chair, he said, don't, Mr. Roberts, don't be putting in one of those wooden seats that's got a plaque on it, saying he loved it here. You know what, right? it's a cut a long story short. Well, I don't want to. This kid said, can I put a statue in mine? We started designing. Because once we'd figured out what we didn't want in there, it was much easier to figure out what we did. Yeah? So I said this kid said to me, can I put a statue in mine? I said, yeah, of course you can. Is it going to be a new statue or an old one? He went, a new one. No, an old one. And I said, why? Because he's changing. Why? He said, because it'll have seen more. Disney crew were in. But it's right, I felt like that. I was like, oh, I'm going to have to give you a detention so we can write that. It wasn't about guys and reflection. It wasn't about old people, but it was about 5 times 8. And 5 times 8 moved from being not very urgent to those children to being very urgent because we needed to get the job done. And that's the spirit of it. There's something around curriculum and how can we get kids to really hook in. I'm sorry, I would like to spend more time on that, but I'll move on. So, with your kids tomorrow, see them as your team. I know you've got 5 teams probably, and some of them will be hard to like. Some of your kids are difficult, I imagine. Are they? Are they all brilliant? They'll come in with wings on back. How are you going to lead them tomorrow? What's the tone that you're setting? Because the tone of your classroom is set by you. So what tone are you setting at the start of the day? I just had to mention this because it was on Twitter yesterday. This dropped into my feed. I'm on Easter holiday this week. No, it's fine. I'm on Easter holiday this week. And this popped on my Twitter feed. Our Secretary of State for Education doing a question and answer at 12:45. Most of you weren't aware. So I don't know. She couldn't speak to me. I don't know. I just thought that was brilliant. Next one. So I hope tonight, from what you've had from mine, from what you've had from me, this isn't grandstanding, I was just reporting back. I'd love to tell you some more about what I've been up to in class. But it's not, listen to our colleagues who've got presentations together tonight after the break. You're going to have 5 brilliant presentations, and don't see them as not for you. Don't see them as alien to your practice. Pull whatever they offer into your practice. There's no need to do that. I mean, there's the kids there at the back as a TA. Dear Uncle Brian, I hope you've had a good birthday. I love you, Uncle Brian. How are you? Have you heard of Satan? He makes you do bad things. Love Rebecca. So I can talk all I want, so can Mike, and so can the presenters. We can all talk outside of the classroom. But once we get the kids in, that's when it all gets really interesting. Those kids, whatever the research says, those children are our variables. Just that. Come on. Thanks a lot, everybody. I'm sorry to have been in a rush, but we've got to listen to our colleagues after. We're going to listen to our colleagues after the break. There's my. We are not leaving. It's very important that we stay, and you don't just kick off with a free mug. Someone's at the paper. There's the Twitter. If you want to email me, that's my direct email. Give me a chance, though. But drop us an email, and I've got a book, and I know many of you have been really great champions of my book, and I'm very grateful for that. It's done really well, it's gone down well with teachers, which was obviously quite useful because I wrote it for teachers. So that helps. So I've got some with me if you'd like to come and have a look, but just have a look online. So big thank you, and thanks to Horbury for inviting me today.
Right, I said you've got some students waiting to some food outside, we've got some lovely drinks. The reason you're able to have some food and some drinks and cooking tea when you arrive and some brilliant price at the end is we've got some sponsors that are going to be outside at break. So they're just going to quickly tell you who you are and what you do. So So first we'll start, we've got Helen Graham from Wakefield Regional Teaching School Alliance.
Evening everybody, really hard act to follow, thanks. Cheers. Got coming after you again. Just a bit about Wakefield Regional Teaching School Alliance. Horbury are one of our big strategic partners and they lend me Julian on a weekly basis to keep me going. And we are a cross-phase teaching school. We are a cross-phase teaching school. We are based at Wakefield City Academy. We work currently with 72 schools in Wakefield and beyond. There's my card on tables. If anybody wants to be in touch, please get in touch. And hope you'll hear from some of you in the future. Thank you.
And we've got from Leeds University, the Carnegie Leaders in Learning, Mary Strode and Rachel Bosley.
Absolutely delighted to be able to support this event. Rachel's left a card. Many of you have probably spoken to Rachel on the phone and sought her advice. Taking lots of things around, if you're inspired by this, around wanting to lead your troop and wanting the answers and to work with professional dialogue and colleagues, you know, around those two questions that were posed for us, then we support around leadership programmes, and over the break we'll be more than happy to talk with you. And also, if you're interested in facilitating on our programmes, then come and speak to Rachel and myself, and we'll provide some more information. Okay, thank you.
And at the back, that's Steph Asphalt from Inside.
Yeah, I'm a education curriculum specialist for Insight. If you want to just come and have a chat, I help with schools deploying iPads, making sure that teachers know how to engage students with the technology that they've been given. I'm also here with Dave Penn from Griffin, who has kindly provided all the prizes for later on. We've also got some freebies as well on the stand here, so just come and have a chat with us and let's see if we can help you out.
That's brilliant. Well, if you'd like to make your way out the doors at the back, we'll be some help the students over the reception.